Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, in our previous class on Vedanta and the science of human possibilities, we came to the conclusion based on the Upanishadic teaching that the one central principle which unifies all our bodily activities, sense perception, all our mental activities, and all the vital processes, that activity or that principle is known as the self. It can be the higher self or the lower self. Even the lower self, when we find that this self is the substratum, or maybe it is something which unifies all our experiences. See, we have a lot of bodily functions which are apparently going on independently. The heart beats on its own, the lungs pump the air on its own, the blood flows on its own, the nutrition and everything, all the five pranas, apparently they are functioning independent of the human being. That is what we think. Even because one of the reasons why we say that, the doctors say that, is that if a person is in a coma, still his prana functions, his bodily functions can be normal, but the mental operations for some reason have stopped. That is as far as a person who is in coma is concerned. But there are other, only the bodily functions are not the vital processes, that is the processes of prana and the sense perceptions. The sense perceptions may not be there. When a person is in coma, he doesn't see, he doesn't hear, he doesn't have any outward activity, outward sense perception. But the internal sense perceptions, we do not know whether they are there or not. That depends on the damage that has happened to the brain. But in any case, the mental operations also may continue, because according to Vedanta, the mind, though it is dependent on the senses, it gets its input from the senses. For some reason, the sense organs are, especially the Gyanendriyas, the Karmendriyas cannot stop, otherwise the heart will stop. The prana is functioning, the body is alive. For all practical purposes, that person is alive. But we think that he does not have any thought. The mental operations have stopped. We cannot say, because the experiencer is still alive. The self which is distinct from the organs, that person can have experiences. He can say, I see, I hear the speaker, I smell and I touch the flower. That is when the sense organs are working. The same individual or the individual self which is within, which is known as Pratyagatman, it is the experiencer of sound, sight, touch, taste and smell through all the different organs. Maybe one is blind, he may not see, but he can use the other organs. So also the involuntary organs like the heart and all, they continue to beat. So somebody is experiencing. You don't say somebody else's heart is beating. I say my heart is beating. Though it is the prana, though when you are unconscious or when you are in coma, say for example, a person is in coma, he does not feel that his heart is beating, but it is beating all the same. So the question may be, the scientist may say, where is the experiencing self? If that experiencing self was not there, then these functions would have taken place, but he would have been declared as dead. At least, even when he is declared as dead, according to Hinduism, the self survives, because the subtle mind and the subtle senses, they are carried away by the individual soul. So the experiencer that underlies the diverse organs, gross or subtle, cannot be identified with any one of them. That is the basic principle. Now, what survives them, that is not the question. The question is, do you see? So should you think that that the eye is seeing? So is the eye self? No, eye is not the self. They are distinct. The instruments of varied perception give you the impression that I am seeing, I am hearing, but the unified experience is what the self experiences, the Jivatma experience. So we have to imagine now somebody with his closed eyes, he's trying to visualize. He sees with his eyes open. That shows that the eyes are not actual seers, because even when you close the eyes, suppose you are seeing a flower, you close your eyes and still that idea or the visualization of the flower is very, for some people they can be very powerful visualizers. That is how meditation works. We don't see the picture or photograph of our Ishta. We close our eyes, but some people can visualize that Ishta because they've seen it a large number of times. They've done japa, they've meditated. So they see internally. The eyes are not the seers. There's something that which visualizes the sight with the eyes closed must have seen it with the eyes open also. Had the sense organs, the Gyanendriyas, been actual perceivers, say for example, the eyes are the perceivers, not the self, then the arts of recognition, desire as here is the house I heard about, I see the food that I tasted. So I want the garment I saw yesterday. Those experiences would not have been possible. So Shankara says in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, we will give some concrete statement from the Upanishads which tells this. The Upanishads were such wonderful works, and it, of course, there is a commentary on the Upanishad, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which Shankaracharya tries to clarify what the Upanishad says. Upanishad says it in a very terse way, in a very short way. That has been expanded. So the expansion is given by Shankaracharya. That's why we have to sometimes depend on the Bhashya, the explanation of the Upanishads, which make the Upanishadic statement more clear. So Shankaracharya in his commentary to that Brihadaranyaka Upanishad verse says, it is not proper to conceive each organ as an experiencer, because unlike some of the scientists who say, no, if the eye sees, it is the eye is the experiencer. The eye is seeing, the ear is hearing. Then how can you relate? If that is true, then what about memory, perception, wishes, desires? The object is not there. Still you see the object when you close your eyes. So how can that happen? To explain that, you have to assume or you have to presume that there is a self, something else which sees. So that has been that unified experience which happens. That is how the Vedanta says, the Upanishad says, that there is an experiencer other than the sense organs, other than the mind, other than the body, and something which is the substratum of all these things. So what one person has perceived, definitely another cannot recollect or know. He cannot even desire. Even though they may be sitting close to each other, I have one desire, I see certain things. You can't say that both are seeing the same world. Even if externally we are seeing the same world, each person is experiencing it in a different way. They may be in identical situation. They may be seeing the same thing. They may be hearing the same music. But the experience of one is not the experience of other. That shows that the self of one, the Jivatma which we have, the individual self which we experience, something which is connected to a higher reality. We'll come to that later, but the experiencer of all the experiences that we see, it is not the organs, neither the mind nor the thought, it is just the self. So if the sense organs, so that is why he says, if the argument Shankaracharya is giving, that in the same situation, two people experience reality in a different way. They see the same things, but they perceive it differently. They experience it differently. Some say the world is very sad or sorrowful. And the same person, there's another person who is in a similar situation. He says the world is full of joy. These things are nothing. Some people take simple things seriously. Some people take great calamities or great troubles as if they were nothing. They are inevitable things which are going on. So, and they are temporary, so we don't have to bother. So a highly philosophical person may see the world as a mart of joy, as Sri Ramakrishna said, in spite of his cancer, in spite of his suffering. Turiyananji could see that Thakur Sri Ramakrishna was in fact very happy. There was the bliss of Brahman very much visible on his countenance. So though he tried to act as if he is full of pain, Turyanji says, no, 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 I can see that you are full of joy. Then Thakur was very happy. He said, oh, you have caught me. I mean, for the purpose of enacting a Leela or a drama, he acted as if he is, but his mind was under control. He was in touch with his inner self, which can never become sorrowful. So if the sense organs, or if there were the actual perceivers, and the motor organs, the karmendriyas, which do all the actions, if they were the actual doers, then there would have been a number of cells in the individual body, which is contrary to the fact. Say, for example, one self will see, another self will hear. No, it is the same self. There are no multiple selves in us. Of course, in a split personality, there is a possibility, but that split personality is not split simultaneously. In some situations, he behaves in a particular way. That is a problem with his mind. It is not a problem with his self. His self is perceiving both the personalities. The personality is because of his mental behavior. So we say this person has a split personality or bipolar and so many things nowadays you see, but they are mental ailments. They're not ailments of the soul. The soul of a patient who has this dual personality or split personality, they behave in a particular way in a particular situation. So are there two people existing, as some people would like us to believe, that then they attribute it, some body, some ghost has possessed this person, so he's not behaving as his ordinary self. Then they do all sorts of black magic on that, try to remove the influence, but it is actually the mind that is playing tricks. So there are multiple cells is ruled out. The Kenopanishad, the first chapter, the first verse, first and second verse, it opens with two fundamental questions. This Kenopanishad is a wonderful Upanishad. It's a small Upanishad, but it asks the fundamental, very gradually, it will take you to the idea of self. That is the beauty of the Upanishads. Vedanta does not ask you to believe, be dogmatic. Oh, it is mentioned in the Kenopanishad, it is mentioned, you have to believe. Because that is something like the Bible of Hinduism, the Upanishads. Gita is also there, but Upanishads are considered to be the Shruti, the Bible of Hinduism. So just because my Bible says something, I need to verify it. That is the method of the Upanishads. Of course, Jesus, if you see the core teachings of the Bible, they are also not to be taken without any questioning. You can question them. The only thing, the process is not explained, and people believe that one has to dogmatically believe that all the biblical teachings are true. It's not necessary. Jesus never said that. In fact, all the teachings that he gave are verifiable in one's life. Only one has to follow certain techniques. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So if we are pure, we shall see God. He lays down a condition. He doesn't say, you may say, I can't see God, so he doesn't exist. That is how a scientific person may say. But Jesus gives you, he says, why don't you try? Try to be pure in your heart, and then you will see the self will reveal itself. For they shall see God, when mean that they will see the reality. So Kenopanishad also starts with the ordinary experiences. It doesn't ask you, make fantastic statements asking you to believe the self. It takes you gradually on a journey, starting with your day-to-day experiences and finally ending with the self. That is how they do it. So he says, first and second verse of the first chapter is Om. It begins with Om. Every Upanishad begins with Om. Kene shitam patati preshitam manaha. I will explain the meaning later. First, I will read what it says. Om ken ishitam patati preshitam manaha kena pranaha pratamaha praiti yuktaha ken ishitam vacham imam vadanti chakshuhu shrotram ka u devo yunakti. So what does it mean? By whose will and direction does the mind proceed to the object? So it's a very, very fundamental question. Who is the person who says, "See, look at this object," and the mind goes, the sense organ sees, I suddenly get a desire. I want to say see a deer or a tiger or a lion. So somebody wills. Somebody has to will go to the zoo and look at the lion. It doesn't go. It doesn't happen haphazardly. Somebody has to create a will. By whom? By who is that person who wills and directs the mind and says you now proceed to the object? That is the first question. The second question is by whom engaged? Engaged by whom? Who is ordering this? Who is telling us to go to the zoo and watch the lion? By whom engaged? That's the vital principle. Now first we come to the sense organ, then it says prana. A prana is always manipulating our body. So who is the one who dictates how our prana should work? Why does our blood pressure become high? We seem to have no control over it. Why does our heart beat in a particular way? So who is that vital principle? So the Upanishad Rishis, they start with the fundamental experiences. They say mind is proceeding towards so many objects every day. Our mind is so restless. Today, in 15 minutes, it says, no, now I want to go there. I want to go there. I keep changing my will. So who is the person inside? Can we find him? Because he is making us dance to his tune. He says, look at the flower, just go to a garden and enjoy yourself. You go there, then suddenly you remember something, the same mind or the same mind is telling you, somebody is telling you that, oh mind, now you go and read some book. So you leave the garden and come back. So also the prana, it behaves in a particular way. Suddenly it will start playing tricks on you. The pressure will rise or the pressure will go down. And it performs its duty, but who is the one who guides it? Who is the one who forces the prana to act in a particular way? So that is the question which the Upanishad says we have to ask ourselves. Then the third part of the question, the Upanishad, the two verses are there. At whose will do men utter speech? Somebody must be, somebody inside must be prompting me. No, now you speak this or you keep quiet. So an effort is required. So there is a will involved there. It doesn't come out spontaneously. You don't speak spontaneously. You think. So especially sensible people will decide whether they should speak or not. But even if one may not speak, but the other organs may be active. Who is the effulgent one? Now he gives a hint. Who is the effulgent one that directs our eyes and the ears? Why do we hear what we hear and why do we see what we see? Then in the second verse, the answer is given. The first verse just asks question. The guru thinks that the disciple will ask me this question. And through this question answer, he is trying to explain how systematically he comes to the conclusion that the self is doing all these things. It is seeing, it is hearing, and the self is directing. It is also directing the will, it is directing the mind, it is directing the sense organ. To come to that conclusion, the second verse says, Shrotrasya Shrotram Manaso Manoyat. I'll read it first and then we'll come to the meaning. Shrotrasya Shrotram. Shrotram means to hear. Manaso Manoyat. Vachoha Vacham Sa Pranasya Prana. Chakshuscha Chakshur Atimucha Dhiraha. Dhira means a steady mind, man of steady wisdom. Pretyasma Lokad Amruta Bhavanti. So who becomes immortal? He, the luminous self, which is within, is the ear of the ear. So what the ear hears goes to that self. What the mind thinks also goes to the self. What the speech utters, the organ of speech, that has its root in the speech of the speech. That means the self is the cause. So it enables, wills, causes the person to speak, causes the person to hear, causes the person to think. Then life of life causes the prana to behave in a particular way. We are only doing it, only we are not fully conscious, because we are living more in the unconscious. Our life is, according to yoga, or according to the Upanishads, there is a thing known as prajna aparadha. Aparadha means uh, the blunder that we do, the mistake, not mistake. It's not a genuine mistake. It's a mistake with which, ignorance that with which we are already born. So we have to get rid of that ignorance. What is that ignorance? It is that prajna aparadha, means we allow the mind, allow the prana, allow the sense organs to dictate us. We are not in control of them. So what can control? The prajna can control. Prajna means, prajna aparadha means, it is your fault that you are not aware. You are speaking without any awareness, with partial awareness. You are listening 50%, you are listening 50%, you are not listening. We call such people absent-minded. So we are not fully aware. That is why awareness meditation and mindfulness teaches you to be aware all the time. That is one way how you can reach or practice this Upanishadic truth, that year of the year. What is hearing? No, we just be aware. The ear is hearing. Sometimes, some people, when there is absolute silence, you don't have to hear something to heighten your awareness. When you are quiet, even the silence, as it were, speaks. The silence becomes so, you are actively enjoying silence. It's not passive. If you sleep, you are passively enjoying silence. You're not hearing anything, you're not seeing anything, you're just sleeping. It's a tamasic state. But if you are fully awake, and the mind, the body, the organs of the body, for some minutes it just experiences that great silence. It is known as the great silence of the Upanishads. So that is possible only when you know that the luminous self which is within is the ear of the ear. It is the ear that is hearing or whatever you hear through the ear. The mind of the mind, the speech of the speech, the life of life, the prana of the, it is the substratum of the prana and the eye of the eye. So Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the fourth chapter also says the luminous self is said to be the life of the life. In a similar way, the verses are almost similar, but there is a slight difference. It starts with prana first, the prana of the prana, the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear, and the mind of the mind. It's very difficult to understand that, but we have to follow the reverse process, because we know the eye sees, but we do not know what is behind the eye. That requires us to live on a reverse gear. No vehicle can always move on a forward gear. It has to have a reverse gear. Sometimes you need to go back. You find out the source of your eye, source of your sight, the source of your prana, the source of, one has to go inwards. There is no other way. If a balance is there, then it is fine. To begin with, we have to balance. We can't be totally introverts. We have to do things externally, but knowing at the same time that the self is within. So he says, pranasya pranam uta chakshuscha chakshushu shrotasya shrotam manaso ye mano viduhu. So te nichikyur brahma puranam agryam. So it is those who have known the prana, the vital force of the vital force. That means those who have known the self, the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear. When the mind becomes quiet, when the mind of the mind, they have realized the ancient primordial Brahman. So Brahman can be realized only when these things, you suddenly realize that the prana is moving, the prana is volatile, the eye is also restless. But if you just close, if you try to just stop, it is impossible to stop. Only in nirvana or moksha these things stop. But till then, you can at least make it comparatively quiet. Let the mind be partially quiet at least. So you get a hint. What is inspiring my mind? What is inspiring my prana? You just become aware. And then you touch that ancient primordial Brahman. So that is what Upanishad says. The point here is that the body, the organs, the mind, the vital principle being devoid of consciousness, they are all jada. They are part of Prakriti. Prakriti is always jada. Prakriti can undergo modifications. The modification that you see, that solid turns, when you heat solid, it becomes liquid, it melts. The liquid, if you freeze, again it becomes solid. These are changes that are happening. So they belong to the inanimate world. Even the plants and other things, they keep on changing. They grow in size, they die. So there are 6 transformations. So the body, the organs, mind, the vital principle that you see, the prana also, being devoid of consciousness, they don't have their own consciousness. It is the self that illumines all these things. The prana acts because the self is behind. The eyes see because the self is behind. So they fall into the category, all these prana and mana and indriyas, gyanendriyas, and all the categories of Prakriti, of our individual self, they fall into the category of inanimate, jada. They are non-intelligent matter. They are matter actually, finer matter or gross matter. And they cannot be self-operative. Something guides them, something makes the change in them. Their coordinate functions must be due to the conscious spirit. The functions that are happening apparently in a very systematic way, unless a person is mad, he will behave in an unpredictable manner. But otherwise, you are more or less a normal human being. He is very predictable. He responds to heat, he responds to cold, he responds. There is some conscious spirit which tells us it may. Sooner or later, the conscious self will tell you what is the right thing, that is what Swami Vivekananda said. No matter how much gross you become, a day will come when Prakriti herself will tell you enough. It will give blow after blow. He says, Swamiji tells it in a very harsh way. He says, Prakriti grabs you by the neck. It's a very unpleasant feeling that, oh, I love Prakriti, I love everything, and why should she grab me? Just because she is very keen, Prakriti, the Jada Prakriti, that you reach the Brahman, the ancient primordial Brahman, from which you have become this limited self. What fun do you enjoy by being a limited person? You become unlimited, become Ananta, become infinite. Why should you be Santa? Santa means limited. So any limitation is sorrow, is painful. I don't want to be limited. If I want money, I want infinite money. That tendency is there. Nobody is satisfied with little. So if you want everything, if you want the entire universe, then it is only at the level of the self. Because no matter how much money or how much possessions you have, the non-intelligent matter is temporary. It will be destroyed. You can't hold on to it. You can't hold on to your money. You can't hold on to your property. Everything has to be given up someday. So nature teaches us the hard way. But if one is wise enough, he will ask these questions. What is beyond all the experiences of mind? Should I not inquire and try to find out if I am a stable person? Or I shall behave like the other worldly people and lose all my stability and keep on complaining the world has been bad to me and sorrow, and there are this eternally we grumble. So Swamiji says the grumbling person is never happy. Whatever you may give, you keep on grumbling. I deserve this, I deserve that. But what is the fun? Those things are anyway temporary. You may get some, and then once you get the toy, you'll say, no, this is not enough. I want something higher. So the grumbler will always grumble. Swamiji says, only a karma yogi will go about doing his work with lot of happiness, knowing fully well that there's no point in grumbling. I get different things come to me. That is what Prakriti, according to the laws of nature, according to the law of karma, things will come and things will go. I will be the witness. My goal in life that is not to be fooled by Prakriti, but understand the Vidya Maya, not be bound by Avidya Maya. So this self, the witness of all these changes in Maya, in Prakriti, is changeless. So naturally it is birthless. If it is changeless, then how there is no it is not born at a particular time. The body may be born at a particular time. The subtle body also may be born at a certain time, but they are not, they are changing. And the only thing that is not changing is the primordial Brahman, or your ultimate self, the real self. Now we are all holding on to our apparent selves, which is full of decay. It will decay, it will die, it will grow. We think we are growing. We think we are born, a child has been born, then we are very happy. But we know that behind the child, behind the old man who is dying, is that same imperishable self. And the goal of human life is to realize this imperishable self before we die. Otherwise, we will be again and again. That is known as Punarjanma. Being born again and again, go through all the grinding things, go to school, go to college, finish your degree, then do a job, and then one day die, and then be born in some other place, or maybe in the same town, then again go to the kindergarten. So this whole thing, the variable is constantly moving in cycles, depending on our karma. But in the midst of that, we have to take out some time, right from childhood, to find out something steady in me. Am I such a restless person that I can't sit quiet and try to find out who is the real I in me? In fact, if you see Ramana Maharshi, he said, you don't have to do anything else. It may not be practical for most of us. We can't be like Ramana Maharshi, that just think of the self. Whenever the idea of non-self comes, he says, just brush it aside and think of the self. Just keep on asking the question, who am I, who am I, who am I? That's one way, but it's not practical for many people. So we just, for half of our time, we are extroverts, we do our work, but at the same time, we know there is something within which we need to recognize or to turn to when we are in depression, when we are in conflict, when there's so many things happening. I tend to lose my stability, the mental stability, the security that I have, the kind of assurance that so believing in the self that gives you, that keeps on changing. That sometimes I become weak, sometimes I become self-confident. Some people say you have to develop your self-confidence. No, it's not like that. It can be developed by removing the ignorance. The self is always confident. We lose confidence because we are holding on to the non-self. So the very idea of self-confidence, to develop self-confidence, no. We don't really develop self-confidence. In a practical way, we say, oh, you should develop some kind of self-confidence. But without knowing the self, how can you have confidence? The word itself is contradictory. You can't develop, you have to understand the self. A person who understands the self, who is a steady person, dhiraha, is a self-confident person. Nachiketa was self-confident, unlike his father. He was sure what he wanted in life. He was sure, he knew what mukti is. He wanted to experience that. So he goes to a guru and tells, I have heard like this, but can you tell me what is the real nature? What happens to me after death? So he was confident. That self-confidence, which comes out of a firm faith in the invariable in the midst of the variable. So the external objects will vary, the experiences will vary, our sorrow and our joys will vary, but we don't have to jump about depending on the external circumstances. We suddenly become joyful, everything is fine for us, and we start enjoying, but it is short-lived. Suddenly something happens and again we give up that joy, and then we go down, and then we feel, oh, what is this? The joy I got a few days ago, can I not get it back again? Then of course suddenly it might come, if we are lucky, if we have some good karma is there. But again, whatever it may happen, the bodily conditions, the mental conditions will keep on varying. That is the law of nature. That is the functions of the organs and the mind and the prana, they all vary. Then you will find there are variations in biological processes also. It's not always in the mind, not only in the sense organs. There are some basic changes which happen, chemical changes in our body. So these biological processes impact us. In fact, that is the beauty of modern science. It can control the experiences, the mental experience. In the modern Western psychiatry, they give drugs, at least temporarily, that person, though it is not the right way, but he can be controlled. The person who is behaving in a very erratic way. So these biological processes, some deficiency, some inherent defect, genetic defect, which leads to some deficiency, will lead to some problem. I mean, will lead to some confusion in the biological processes. Things will not happen in the normal way. Sometimes people are born with juvenile diabetes, and then there are so many childhood diseases. The prana is not active in the heart because there is some heart wall. So the problem of the heart wall can also, the prana is still there, but it is not functioning because the body is a problem. So the organs and the biological functions also impact the prana and also the mind. It's not that they are, but they are more gross. By controlling the mind, you can control the body slowly. It will not happen immediately, because that we have made that habit. We are too much dependent on our body, our senses, our experiences, our ego. Everything is dominating us. So we can't immediately give it up. We have to go slowly and steadily while carrying out our external duties. We just try to find out what is this self. So the luminous self which is within, finally the Vedanta concludes, I mean the Upanishad concludes, that the luminous self is the one who cognizes all. Any change outside presupposes that there is someone unchanging within us. If that were not to be there, then every time I see a change, I will change. So how can I? It is like trying to gauge the speed of a moving train when your train is also moving. So if it is moving with the same speed, you will think the same train opposite to you is stationary. It's a relative feeling, unless you hear the sound, of course. Suppose it was soundproof. Then your train is moving at the same speed the other train is moving, and you think it is steady. So a change which is happening presupposes the train has to stop, or you have to stop, you have to go to the platform if you want to know the real speed of the train that is passing you. Otherwise, if your train or the object, the subject itself is moving very fast, then it cannot see motion. So a change is presupposes, we have to take it for granted that there is something unchanging which is observing our life. Our Atman is always active. It is active during deep sleep. It tells you whether you had a good sleep or not. Who is telling us? We say, oh, I had wonderful sleep yesterday. It's very clear. We were not awake. We were not awake. We were not even aware of what is going on in the world outside. But at least something tells us, something was watching our deep sleep state. Our prana was going on. Mind was also going on in memories and dreams and other things. But there was this luminous self which was watching all these things. And when you get up, depending on how your prana has behaved, how your mind has behaved, the subtle mind, how much disturbance was there, that will decide what your experience of sleep will be. If the sleep is good, you have to assume that your prana, your indriyas and all they were pretty much under control. They were not restless when you slept. If you sleep with a restless idea and a restless mind and the restless prana, then how can you expect? You will carry that same world into your sleep. So that is why they say when you sleep, you have to go with a very, either repeat the mantra or read the gospel or something, which will slowly calm your mind down. You can't make it blank. Please don't do that, because then other issues will come. Some people try to think that I'll make my mind blank and go. Never make the mind blank and go to sleep. It may help some people, highly advanced people, but making the mind blank is not the solution. Vedanta says, think of the Ishta, who is unchangeable. I don't know whether he's unchangeable or changeable, but I superimpose that unchangeable infinite nature, Satchidananda, on on my Ishta. So I presuppose that and then meditate. Even that helps. Even that helps. It's like closing your eyes and visualizing. The God is not there, your Ishta is not there, but you can imagine him. Similarly, when you uh, quieten the mind, when you quieten the mind, what happens is the self becomes intensely aware. If you are really sincere, you see the effort in quietening the mind, it happens naturally also. Suppose you go to the Himalayas. Suddenly, as I told you, I used to go to the coast, seeing the infinite sky, sometimes the thought stops. But you can't get that situation always. You're always in the midst of change. You can't suddenly go and find, that's why people live in the Himalayas for years and years, the whole life they live. Because every day they get up, they see the steady Himalaya, the rock steady Himalaya. So that gives the idea that the unchanging reality within us is just as steady as these Himalayas. It's not moving. And the enjoyment or the joy we get when we approach, if you go from Mayavati or Shamlatal towards Mayavati, when you go, suddenly when you turn, make it curve, suddenly you are face to face with a massive rock. Like you just feel that all your car and the trees which are surrounding you, they are all moving. But suddenly in the background you see a massive white block of ice. It's a huge snow peak that we see. So it appears to be so steady. The trees are moving, there are animals, monkeys running around, and we are also moving. But why do we get joy? We said, okay, let us just park the vehicle and see. I want to enjoy that. What makes you what gives you joy? Because the nature of Brahman, the nature of one which that is steady. If your mind is steady, you can enjoy a little of that Brahman. If your mind is steady, the mental state should not vary. So, in case of the observer, the interim change, I mean, a unchanging observer only can relate the succeeding event with the preceding one. So I was there when things were good. I am still there when the things are bad. So I say the situation has become worse. So there should be one person, the unchanging one, behind all of our actions. So no matter how much you sympathize with your friend, how much the guru sympathizes with the disciple, he cannot experience what the disciple has to do it himself. He can at the most give some suggestions. That is what the guru does. But then, as Sri Ramakrishna said, one has to eat. Somebody can make a pudding for you, but you have to eat it yourself. So also the observer which is within, one has to discover oneself. Of course, when you discover that self within, it becomes Sachidananda, then yourself, myself doesn't remain. But that is a later state. But at least to have a steady mind, a person has to play the role, assume the role of an observer of things. You see, that's why people who are very quiet and who always observe, they don't like to speak. They just want to observe. If they really are doing it with a spiritual motive, if they are just doing because they are too tired to talk, then it won't help them. Their mind may be highly active, but they are quiet, or they are very mischievous. Mischievous people also, the robbers are very quiet. They don't make noise. They don't want to be caught. That is not the type of quietness that I am speaking of. It is really trying to make the mind quiet, our own mind. The other quietness is artificial. The robber is intensely thinking that, but he knows I cannot afford to make the slightest noise. So he is very aware every second, every breath everybody is taking, every movement of the when he goes inside to rob something, everything he takes, he has to be very, very aware. Of course, if he decides to meditate on Brahman, the skill will be very useful for him because he has already developed that. Any person in any field, there is a joke, one of our senior, not joke, in one of our senior monks who rarely traveled, happened to travel in a vehicle which was run by another junior monk. He had never traveled. He always traveled, very rarely traveled, and traveled on professional. Naturally, when monks drive, who do not drive so often, uh, the people are afraid whether he will take me to the destination. So this senior monk was accompanying the junior monk, who was practically a very, very active person who knew driving, he knew law, he knew so many things. So he was talking at the same time, telling Maharaj about, see, this part of Calcutta, this is here, and at the same time he's driving very, and you know the traffic in Calcutta. Suddenly you have to put a brake, a cow may come or an animal may come. And he was doing everything. He never made a single mistake. So Maharaj, that Swamiji, who for the first time traveled in a vehicle run by a monk, I think he was very much impressed. So he came and told us in our class that today I saw so and so, who is apparently very well known for his restlessness. I wonder how he could drive so nicely. He could, a slight mistake and he would have killed so many people today, but he drove so fast and so efficiently. I wish, he said, I wish he takes to meditation with the same awareness and same concentration which he uses for driving a car. So that opened our eyes. So it's not that you don't have that skill. You are aware, you are trying to be fully involved. Or say, for example, children watch the football match and they are so deeply involved in that their awareness or the concentration is 100%. Nothing, hunger or any noise or anything. They just are focusing on the screen. It is a wonderful thing which every human being has. He has the potential to be a Buddha. He has the potential to become a Vivekananda if he meditates like Vivekananda. As you meditate, so you become. As Buddha said, as you think, so you become. What he meant was, as if you are having evil thoughts, you will be evil. At a lower level, it is true, as you think. But as you meditate, so you become. If you are calm, you become a calm person. You meditate more, you become a calm person. So, the observer self, the more you try to know, and don't run after the variation, don't run after the changing things. Reserve some time of your day to see your own self. If that is done, then the self can be perceived. That is the guarantee which Upanishads are giving. It's not some cock and bull story. It is just taking you in a reverse process. He says, what makes you see, you hear, you taste, everything that you do, trace it back to the origin. And that is how you will find yourself. That Upanishads say, it's not just the monopoly of the rishis. You can do it. If one man can do it, all can do it. It only requires that kind of determination, that kind of uh, uh, awareness, 100% awareness in whatever you do. So you may ask, suppose I'm a doctor or I'm a engineer or something, and I have to do very skilled work. If I am doing with 100% attention, will it result in spiritual progress? Definitely it will, but not at that time. At that time, you are apparently doing your physical work. If you are motivated with money or getting a reward for what you are doing, then it is different. But if you are doing it just for the sake of doing it, just as you meditate just for the sake of meditation, there is a higher purpose to enjoy the self within. But whether you are doing some operation, whether you're doing some surgery, or getting involved in something which requires your 100% attention, there cannot be one mistake. So you imagine, as that Maharaj was telling us, the senior Swamiji, that when I saw this particular brahmachari or sannyas, he was driving so fast, any moment I was practically worrying that some accident will happen today, the way he was driving. But every time he coordinated it so well. So then he told him, you are such a good driver. So if you are a very good driver, if you are a very good cook, if you cook with all your mind, attention and focus, that same mind can meditate or can be used to meditate within. The sooner we do in life, the faster we'll discover ourselves and the lesser our problems will be. So we have just completed, we'll take just one more minute. So the Vedantic view, it took some explanation. We just saw two Upanishadic verses, but the Vedantic view, to conclude today, the Vedantic view of the real man, not the apparent man that I am, with so many labels and so many things attached to me. I'm a rich man, I'm a poor man, I'm an intelligent man. So many labels we either they are given by others or we put those labels, use those labels for ourselves. But Prakriti doesn't care. It doesn't care whether you are. That's why Swamiji says, if a shoemaker can make a wonderful shoe, he is greater than the king who rules his kingdom perfectly. So you don't have to be a king to meditate. You can be a shoemaker as well, but you make those shoes perfectly. Whatever you take, that is the whole secret of karma yoga. Vedanta says you be fully aware in what you do, and that awareness will help you to meditate better. But you have to test it. You see, the problem is we say we are busy, but at least, as the Holy Mother said, take a stock of what you have done. At least just before going to sleep, hear the repeat the mantra, and try to find out and go to sleep with a calm and collected mind, with the mind going inward, and that will result in the inward nature of the mind. You'll perhaps enjoy a dreamless sleep or some kind of touch of the soul you can get in the 8 hours that most of us, you sleep. When we sleep, we have no control over it, but through practice, especially just before going to sleep, if we remember something, remember a steady thing, our Ishta, our mantra, and think that my mind will be stable throughout the night. This is a simple thought you have to give. Listen to your minds repeating the mantra internally, and once you have done that, just forget the world. Anyway, you have to get up in the morning and the world will come back to you. It's not going to run away so easily. But at least, why should I waste and be confused during the 8 hours of sleep? I lose that also. Then no matter how much I sleep, it will be a disturbed sleep. So the psychophysical organism that we have, God has created a mechanism which will force you to sleep when you are tired. Otherwise, the body will collapse. The prana also will collapse. If you have sleepless nights, the health will be affected. So the self within tells the body, tells the mind, enough is enough, now you go to sleep. But how you go to sleep, what is the last thought before you sleep, that determines the quality of the sleep. So whatever you do when you are awake, whether you are meditated or not, at least towards the end of the day, when you really go to sleep and you have 8 solid hours or 6 hours, depending on how much you sleep, these are to be utilized. And that it slowly accumulates. See, it appears it is a simple thing, oh, what is there? But how many of us try to think before we go to bed of the unchangeable? If we just focus on it, meditate or on it very deeply, and then go to sleep, you will find that you will have the best quality of sleep. It may not come in one day. You may have to practice it again and again and again. And then the mind becomes steady when you are in waking state. And then it will, at the end of the day, taking stock of the situation, how much your concentration has improved, how much your patience has improved, how much your awareness has been sharpened. Are you telling, as Holy Mother said, take a stock of your own life, how your mind has changed over a period of time. If I'm doing sadhana, there should be some change. Has a little steadiness. You don't have to depend on others. You can ask these questions yourself. Am I becoming more and more less and less restless? Or am I becoming more and more restless? So what's the use? I'm meditating, but nothing is happening. So all these things we help us knowing the real nature of the knowing the real man, and not succumbing to the apparent man that is within us. That is the goal of spiritual life. So I'll just see, there are a few questions, I believe. Yes, two big questions I'll just answer. In today's technological period or time, we have artificial intelligence, logarithm, robots, etc. They do not have illuminated self of their own or consciousness like the human beings. How can it be perceived in relation to Vedanta teachings? No, the AI and all the things, they are equally jada or equally ignorant, or maybe you can't say ignorant, equally inanimate. The computer and all those things, they appear to know, they appear to solve your problems, but they don't have that consciousness. It is borrowed consciousness. It is our brain. It is the hands that operate on the computer. It's a program that has been made by some intelligent uh, uh, intelligent computer scientist who can do the programming. So the credit to the computer or to the artificial intelligence goes to a conscious principle. Artificial intelligence does not start by itself. It has to be done by somebody who is aware. So with relation to Vedanta teachings, it is perfect. Vedanta believes that no matter how artificial intelligence, robots and computers come, still whatever happens, they can't replace the human consciousness. The computer robot or whatever machine is calibrated to do certain actions. They may be very efficient, but they are not conscious things. They are jada all the same. So they are jada and Prakriti has made them inanimate, just as a stone is a jada. You can't say why a stone is like that. It has no chance to expand or evolve, whereas a human being has that capacity because of the unique characteristics of the human being. So the next question is from Italy. I hear on several occasions about this presumed objective of reaching the emptiness of mind. It's quite common from what I've seen, but I've always been very doubtful about it. Yeah, you have to be doubtful, because unless one is very advanced, it can lead to so many mental problems. We can't discuss a few. There are hundreds of problems. So one gentleman maybe was practicing this kind of making the mind empty. So one day he was traveling. He wanted to come to the Vedanta center. On the highway, suddenly his mind became empty. Fortunately, he was able to brake somewhere and take it to the side. I think that much of consciousness was there. And then a strange thing happened. He came and told me himself. He says, midway or maybe a few minutes after he had left his house, he totally forgot what was the purpose of his driving, where he is supposed to go. He was conscious, he was fully awake. Then with all the difficulty, with great difficulty, he somehow remembered his, I think he had a speed dialing facility, so just managed to press 1. So the son, I think, saw there is an emergency call. So he told him that I don't know where I am. He said, "Arey, you were driving, just don't start the car." So he came in his car. Fortunately, he was not very far. He came and then he said, "You told us that you are going to the Vedanta center." "Oh, yes. Now I remember. Now I'll go." But the son did not allow him. He accompanied him, brought him here. Then he said, "Swamiji, this is what is happening." So I said, "Do you practice any kind of meditation?" "Yes," he said, "recently I had undergone some mindfulness or something, where we were told mindfulness is not bad. Mindfulness meditation or awareness meditation, where you see the objects, perceive them, but just focus more on that. That is mindfulness." Whereas here he was asked not only to be fully aware, but slowly reduce the thoughts and make the mind blank. So that can be dangerous if, because the samskaras don't die. It's not a natural way of silencing the mind. The natural way is through yoga. Anyway, so it is quite common from what you have seen. You might have seen many people mentioning about it. But if you then, but I was always doubtful about it. So it is good that you were doubtful. Otherwise, you would have fallen into that trap. The mind cannot become empty because its own nature simply does not permit it. Yes, that is true. So you can't force. You can't force the mind to become empty. Mind by nature, slowly, if you remove your restlessness, becomes steady, steady, steady. Then after reaching that stage, you can make the mind empty. You will not be harmed. I mean, it will not affect you. So the next part is, I believe it is rather a matter of focusing. Where did this idea of emptying out the mind originate from? No, there are traditions in Buddhism which believe in the Shunyavada, who believe in emptiness. He said the reality is zero or nothing, emptiness, just emptiness. So they may have that technique which has now come down. Some people just take it, they read it in the books and then go on practicing themselves. They may or may not get benefit, but they will make others follow very fanatically. They will try to convince and change people, say do this, do this. And people in the beginning are really cheated, in the sense they feel, oh yes, if my mind is empty, and then they relish it because all the tensions seem to have gone. But along with that, all the good things also will go. Bad things will stop, the worrying, anxieties, everything will go. But then your mind becomes blank. As this gentleman said, I didn't know where I wanted to go. So it took a lot of time when I told him, don't do this, just focus on your mantra which was given by your guru and meditate with a positive mindset. Never try to make it empty. That is the answer. So I will take your leave. Yes. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.